Hi, good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Hopefully still awake. I know it's a bit warm in here and a bit uncomfortable, but as you say, we're one presentation away from having coffee, so hopefully not keep you too sleepy before then. Welcome to this presentation, right? So this is anatomy of an attack. You can't stop what you can't see. We're going to go through a presentation here that's going to talk about what an attacker does, the type of threats we're going to be looking at, and how you can go about defending these things. So when we look at these things, your cybersecurity teams are actually very busy, right? They work in very complex environments, protecting a myriad of different devices across many different interconnected systems. And they protect things from users in hybrid workspaces, through to traditional infrastructure, right the way through to workloads in various cloud environments. And this could be quite difficult, right? It's very challenging doing what they're doing, trying to stop threats at every turn. And this can be quite complex and difficult to do, especially if you don't have the right tools to do the job. It's also very stressful, right? Playing this game of whack-a-mole where we're beating threats down, new threats emerging, everything's happening quite dynamically, and it requires a lot of intense concentration. And this can lead to what we know as cyber burnout, right? So this is effectively wearing your team out. You get a lot of retention deficits going on. People leave the organization. It's difficult to retain staff. So Forrester actually did a report on this, and their report basically indicated that 66% of employees in cyber across US and Europe suffer from significant stress. And 51% of those are actually being prescribed medication for this. So keeping your staff, retaining your staff is a key thing for you to do. And it's all down to this guy, right? This is a guy who's keeping us awake at night, continuous threats, this continuous game of cat and mouse where we're trying to keep ahead of threats is very difficult to do. But it's quite difficult to do this, and we'll look at what this guy's actually doing, right? He's always coming up with new ways of doing things. Get more creative with the tool sets that he uses. So to keep ahead of him, you need to make sure you've got the right tool sets, right? We're obviously trying to keep staff retained while at the same time keep the stress levels down for people in your organization. And you need the right tools to do that. So what are the right tools? So you can't really analyze this without saying, what's the threat, right? We need to understand what the threat is before we can look at how we combat it. So take a minute to go through this guy's head, right? So I'm going to play in my head this scenario of being an attacker. So I'm very goal-oriented, right? I might act as an individual, or I might be part of a group of people, and I might be motivated in different ways. So I could be politically motivated, in which case, countries like Russia, China, North Korea come to mind, where the state-sponsor type of events, and I may be motivated in that way. Alternatively, the way we're going to be looking at this here is financial motivation, right? People who do ransomware attacks, people who get into your organization, look at extorting money from you. So we're going to get through this type of thing. Now, I'm going to create a fictitious scenario here, right? I'm going to pretend here that I'm going out and I'm going to have a look for and target an organization. So I scour the internet, and I'm going to come across an organization that has been developing an application for, let's say, a year. It's going to be groundbreaking for their industry, whatever that may be. But I'm going to pick this company called Cloudbits, right? It's fictitious. Now, this organization has been developing, as I say, for a year. They've done some development. It's going to make some changes. So I'm going to try and get into that organization. I'm thinking to myself, this could be quite lucrative for me, right? So I might get through the process of saying, if I attack them, ransomware them, then I'm going to get to a scenario where I can extort money. Or better still, if I can actually steal their data as well, then I can use that as leverage. So I can threaten to sell that on the dark web, or I can threaten to release it publicly and cause untold reputational damage. So we'll look at two of those scenarios, but this one we're going to focus on is specifically around ransomware. So I've got my target, right? So I've got a couple of options on how I might want to get in here. So I could choose the route of saying, you know what, I'll look at vulnerabilities in your environment. And I might say, well, have you got anything external facing? Your website, your corporate website, some other application website? I might look at that and I might think to myself, well, I'll use the tools to get into here. But I don't know what tools you're using. How do I go about finding these things? Well, I'm quite sure quite a few of you in this room here have got a corporate website that has a career page, right? And you might occasionally employ IT people. So if I go and look at a job for an IT analyst or consultant or something along those lines, I'm going to find useful information there. People tend to actually overemphasize on what the requirements are. So the job ad might say, I'm looking for someone with Windows Server 2016, 2019 skills, SQL Server, Oracle, SAP, anything along those lines, Azure, Google Cloud, anything. Don't do this, right? When you're advertising on your job sites internally, don't give too much information out and overemphasize it. Try and keep it basic so that when you've got the people in front of you, then you can ask them those difficult questions, but don't expose what you can, because to me, you give me the crown jewels, right? You're effectively saying this is gold dust to me. I can take these things, I now know what you're using, I can now target that. Another approach might be just to do a standard phishing attack, right? So I might pick an employee and prey on human weakness, right? I might craft an email here that I can send out here that's going to provoke an emotional response and let me in the door. So we're going to look at doing that. So I've got CloudBits as my organization that I'm targeting. I've decided to do a phishing attack. I now decide who I'm going to catch, right? So where would I go possibly to find out information about this? Well, I'm pretty sure most of the people in this room probably all use LinkedIn, right? We're all very proud of what we do, our career paths, what we've done, and where we've got to. So I use LinkedIn. And I'm going to go on there, and I'm going to find for CloudBits there's an employee called Amy Daly, and Amy is the manager of the developers. So I think as an attacker, she's the manager. She's probably got access to their IP, so I can maybe use her, try and provoke her with an email. So we're going to do that. Got our organization, got my target. We're going to go ahead and carry out our attack now. So to do that, this is actually a real attack that's been done for this demonstration, right? So I'm not based in Stockholm, but I'm going to be the attacker attacking from Stockholm in Sweden. And my victim is going to be based in the Midlands here, where the organization is. So let's just go through the scenario of this and see how quick this happens. Right, so here's Amy's desktop, right? As you would expect, as we all probably do, we've got local documents where we keep our normal office stuff. But Amy's obviously got access here to a shared area on a file server where there are development IP, and here we have the company crown jewels. So if I go out to my Stockholm server now in Sweden, I've got an attacking box here. We could call it command and control server, but this is quite a basic version of it, where I'm just listening for callbacks from my victim, and I'm going to use HTTP, standard web port, to put data down, take data out without being seen. As you can see, there's nothing in here at the moment. So if I pop back out here, Amy's about to have a bad day. She just comes into the office, she starts up her machine, and she starts up Outlook. And within here, here's this provocative email, right? It's marked urgent. It's intended to provoke a response. If I open this spreadsheet that's attached to this, and it's sales related, then I'm going to have a look at this, and I've been asked to respond to this as quick as possible, right? So I'm preying on human weakness here. So I click Enable Editing because I'm going to want to edit the spreadsheet, and then I click on Enable Content because there might be macros in here that I want to use. But just by clicking that last button there, I've initiated the attack. So I now have, in Stockholm and Sweden, access to Amy's machine with the full permissions that she's got on that machine as well. And I'm going to use tools that are built into the operating system like PowerShell, right? So I can just do a quick query here that basically says, what does the environment look like for me? And I can see there's a C drive, a D drive, but there's an S drive there on that file share. That looks interesting to me. I'm going to go into the S drive. I can see there's a developer share, right? So I'll go into that developer share, and let's have a look and see what I can get access to. And lo and behold, here are the company crown jewels. What I'm going to do now as the attacker is I'm going to take that information, I'm going to zip it up into an archive, and I'm going to export it out to my Stockholm server. And I'm going to use PowerShell again to do this using HTTP. So I exfiltrate that data. I then go out and I can have a look at the tab at the top here on the right. And when I check that folder for my uploads, I'm going to see there's a jewels.zip in here. And I can then unzip that file, and I've got access to the content that's in there. So I now have access to your IP. Now that I've got access to it, I'm going to deprive you from having access to it. So this is the last part, the hammer blow, if you like. I'm going to run another piece of PowerShell. It's going to deploy a piece of ransomware down to Amy's desktop, and we're going to cause havoc on the end of that. So we run the script, and then Amy's back on here. Bear in mind, she's seen nothing, right? She's not aware of anything that's happening at this stage. But when she closes the spreadsheet, closes Outlook, and goes to start looking at her environment again, she might go to documents to try and retrieve a file, but something weird's happening with the files now. And you'll see very quickly that the ransomware message is popping up at the back end. We're now going to get a pop-up from Windows saying, do you want me to stop this? And we'll say, oh, don't do this, but it's too late. The ransomware's been deployed, and it's now effective on the endpoint. So my data is now being encrypted. I've got a certain amount of time, certain date I've got to pay this ransomware by. Difficult scenario, right? Bad day for all. If I go back out to my documents now, I can see they're all fully encrypted. But the thing about this is not just Amy's workstation that's affected. Because I've got access to that file share, all of the files in that file share are also encrypted. So if I go to developers here, my colleagues can no longer access these files. So, bad day for all, right? You might think to yourself, right, okay, I can recover from this. I've got backups, right? So I can restore all this, which you probably can, but it's a real inconvenience to do that. However, you don't know what's happened, right? You've got no idea how this attack occurred. So how do you unpick it? It's difficult to do. I could pay the ransom, and they'd give me the decryption key, or I don't pay the ransom, I restore it from backups. But either way, this could happen in an hour, a day, a week, and there's nothing to stop happening again because I don't know the nature of what's actually happened here. So as we move forward here, would you be able to detect this? Maybe some of you could, maybe some of you don't. You also saw there that it only took me 4 minutes to do this, right? You often come across people who talk about dwell times. That's when the attacker establishes their way into the door until the point they're detected. And you'll hear figures banded around, it's 10 days, it's 21 days, it's 5 months. But it really depends on the maturity of your SOC, your environment, and the tools that you're actually using. You need a tool that is able to look at behaviors, right? So signature-based tools are no longer enough. You need to be able to look at file executions, modifications, changes to your registry, changes to network connection, because this is what an attacker is actually doing now. They're doing behavioral type activities on your endpoint and not necessarily dropping much on disk at all, right? A lot of this could happen in memory. So in order to unpick this, you need to record all this data, and it's got to be recorded into a system where you're able to replay it should the worst happen. So if you get hit by this and an incident response is actually deployed, you've got to be able to go in here, unpick this, and look at what this is. And this is what we do at VMware Carbon Black XDR. Right? So we give you a visual representation of what the kill chain looks like. We show you every process, how it relates to every other process, every script that's run, every file that gets dropped on an endpoint, every location that they're dropped into, right? And everything else related to that. We can track all of these events related to all of these processes as well. And you need this. You've got to be able to play this back, because without having a tool like this, you can't understand what the nature of the attack has been. This is common, right? There are many organizations that do EDR. If we look at what we've got, we pioneered actually EDR back in 2012. We've been maturing that product ever since. So with our enterprise EDR, I was always able to look at things like IP sources, destinations, location information. But we've now evolved this into XDR now. With our XDR, we've actually included in our sensor, our agent, the ability to monitor network type events. So this picture for EDR now becomes this, right? So I now get to see really rich information about protocols being used, the type of activity that's happening with that, the web server it's getting it from, the location information sent out, information received. And because I can now see more, I can stop more, right? So I can now take this and I can create what we call a watch list, and basically set an alert on this. It says, if anybody tries to exfiltrate data out of my environment, alert me to it, either by the console or by email. I can do both. So we get to see all of this information now. And this is all about tracking and kind of after the fact, but it also allows us to do threat hunting in advance, right? So we can spot these behaviors before the worst happens. So now that we can see it and we can unpick it, can we defend against it? Well, yes, we can. Our next generation antivirus now, again, when we talk about next generation antivirus, we're saying moving beyond signatures are now able to look at behaviors. What we're able to do here is, well, let's look at this example I gave you earlier. Could I have prevented it? Well, the answer is yes. So with our next generation antivirus, we're able to look at behaviors that are exhibited by attackers and be able to stop them in their tracks. So under our prevention area here, and this is an out-of-the-box policy, right? So if I look at prevention, I've got some blocking isolation rules. Known malware, suspect malware are all given. But when we do things that advanced attacks do, like scrape memory for stealing credentials, like performing ransomware-like behavior, encrypted files, injection of code processes. These are all advanced techniques and tactics that are used by attackers that we can stop. And you can see here there's one in there for any Office app that invokes a command interpreter of which PowerShell is one, which I used heavily earlier, then deny that operation. 2 minutes. 1 minute. Yeah. So this is me wrapping up now, right? So here we go. This is opening the sales report again. We've got that policy in place now. User comes in, they click on this PowerShell macro, nothing, right? So we've stopped the attack dead in its tracks. So now we've got no callback. We stopped initial access, therefore we'll stop the whole ransomware attack. Want to know more? Come and see us. There's a team of us over at the Carbon Black stall. We'd be more than happy to discuss all the functionality we've got. We'll let you go have your coffee now. Thank you very much for your time.